All right, before we get started, please understand it does us no good to exaggerate what we're seeing out there. We are just trying to give you the frontline truth that, the guys that I trust see on the water. We're full-time guides. We make our living catching fish. If we're saying that it's bad and it's not, we're not helping ourselves. We're hurting ourselves for no reason, because when people see these videos saying that, hey, the fish kill is bad in certain area, then maybe they don't want to come book a trip with us. So that's not what this is about. This is about just reporting to you guys what we're seeing right now. So that being said, let's get into it. All right, as promised, a continuation from last week. Last week we did a video and it was right after the freeze. It was current situations in the water. I wanted to put something out to where people had to rely less on social media and speculation and more on what people are looking at, right now. And we're doing that again this week. This is current situation. There's a lot more good news this week, which I'm very happy to talk about. I went and spent the day yesterday with David McKee. He's a retired marine biologist. He's been fishing the Corpus Christi Baffin area for close to 40 years. Scott Murray, he has a lot of experience with it. I've been in contact with the chief of science and resources at Texas Parks and Wildlife. So these are people that I've been getting information from, for a while now, and passing it forward to you guys. So we're gonna talk about, let's talk about the good first. First off, Sabine, East Galveston, West Galveston, they're looking pretty good. I talked to some people in Sabine. They said they're not really seeing a whole lot of a kill. Things are looking good. East Galveston, Alan and Mr. West told y'all last week, didn't look that bad. There's a little bit of a kill over there, but people are still catching fish. It's not something that looks really detrimental. West Galveston, I spoke with Russell Smith. He went running around. I spoke with a couple of guides. They've been out catching fish. So those areas look like they haven't been impacted too bad. Now, once you get south of there, then we're running into some areas that are having some problems. I have several guides from those areas. I talked to Wayne Davis, Cliff Webb, Pat Gardner, Dean Thomas, Scott Null. We've kind of covered all of those areas, so we're going to get to that. First things first, we got into East Matagorda Bay. East Matagorda Bay, this time last week, there was some kill. I mentioned there was a bunch of croaker floating in the middle, and that some of the older guides have said they had never seen that before. My concern was, and this was on Saturday, we put the video on Friday, I went out on Saturday, and I covered about 20 to 25 miles of East Matagorda Bay, and there wasn't a whole lot of death on Saturday. I mean, there was a substantial amount, but not anything super alarming. But what did alarm me was that there was no life. I didn't see any fish warming up on the flats, doing what they were supposed to do. And that really, really bothered me. And unfortunately, it has came around full circle to what I was scared of. Pat and Larry Higlins of Kelly Wigglers, I'm going to let them, tell you what they saw.
Yeah, so we came out this morning. We were going to pretty much just see what was going on in the bay, possibly do a little fishing. Immediately when we hit the bay, we started seeing a ton of dead trout. The day pretty much turned into a survey day, running around, pretty much seeing what we had left.
Yeah, having never experienced a fish kill, Pat, you haven't either, I guess. Yeah. That was a sight to take in. It was just kind of eerie, just dead fish. What, thousands of trout, would you say?
Thousands. And I've always heard about my grandfather, my dad talking about the freezes in the 80s.
Yep.
And how bad it was. It's hard to imagine that was worse than this. I know people are trying to say that it's not that bad. Well, what we saw today was just about as bad as it can get, at least for our little bay over here.
I'm not a scientist. I just started fishing in East Matagorda recently, but I can state with confidence that East Matagorda is not going to be the same for a while.
Yeah.
Not after the size of the fish that we saw. I don't even want to begin to estimate how many 3, 4, 5, 6 pound fish we saw. The heavier ones, I mean, it really is ridiculous. We've got some of the video and the pictures. Trout of a lifetime, numerous of them that a lot of anglers have never seen or in person.
Yeah, we had 5 or 6 over 10 pounds.
Yeah.
The amount of 8, 9s, 7s.
We
was
stopped-
mind blowing. We stopped netting anything under 7 pounds. It was crazy. I knew we had big fish here. Obviously, we catch them, but the sheer number of them, I was astounded. I mean,
yeah. Well, that East Matagorda has that reputation. That's why I started coming over here. Just to, Galveston's kind of my home waters, and I knew the fishery was excellent here, but I had no clue. That's just what we saw in one day. God knows how many have already floated and gone back down or aren't going to float. But sheep's head, a couple of big black drum. One of the good takeaways was we only saw a few redfish. I think 5 or 6, something like that.
Yeah, not many.
And I think after about 5 hours of driving around, we saw a first flip of bait fish, and we hopped out and made a wade. Pat had a bite, a couple bites maybe.
Yeah.
Then immediately after his first bite, they hook up with a little potato chip flounder. So
that was about the extent of our fishing today.
yeah, and we just wanted to kind of see, just like Pat said, survey things. Where could we find redfish? Could we find any signs of life? And it's pretty bleak out there as far as what we saw and the number of trout killed. Not to say there aren't still trout around, but the number and the size of the trout killed is pretty bad.
And honestly, we only covered a fraction of the bay, and just the numbers, like he said, especially of large trout, was just, it was crazy.
All right, thanks, Pat and Larry. Y'all know Pat Gardner. He's a good friend of Captain Caleb TV, the show, the YouTube channel. He's a great friend of mine. I consider him a brother. And whenever I called him the other day, he told me he was sitting at his boat in tears because he couldn't comprehend everything that he saw out there, and it sounds pretty bad. Myself, Pat, and then I've been talking to Michael Quebeca all day today, which today's Friday, and all of us, we think that it's pretty dismal for East Matagorda Bay. Pat and I made the comment that we're not sure if there's a fish left alive in the bay, and that's rough. Or I say a trout. I've heard reports of a couple of people catching a handful of redfish, not many, so it is what it is there. Moving on to West Matagorda Bay. I think West Matagorda is going to fare a little bit better. I haven't gotten a lot of reports of a fish kill there. I haven't gotten a lot of reports of fish up on the flats, but West Matagorda Bay has deeper water, and those fish can slide off and get in warmer water, and then maybe they'll be back. But we haven't seen a lot of evidence of a bad time in West Matagorda Bay. Now, moving on to Port O'Connor, we have Captain Scott Null. Scott's going to kind of give you an update on what they're seeing there, and I'm going to let him tell you what he's seeing.
Port O'Connor, appears that we may have escaped the hard stuff that some of the other places like Matagorda and the lower Laguna Madre have suffered. Baffin, I'm hearing some rough reports out of those places. I get pictures every day, videos every day. The number of big trout that were killed in places like East Matagorda it's devastating. Port O'Connor, we took hits over on the island, Pringle, some of the back lakes back there. I heard some things out of Power and Fifth. Places where fish sought refuge and it just wasn't quite deep enough. A lot of our fish, I think, got out into the deeper water. We do have a good bit of deeper water around here with Matagorda Bay and Espiritu and all that. So this freeze came in slow enough. I think maybe some of those fish got out there and hunkered down. I wouldn't say we're completely out of the woods. I'm cautiously optimistic for our area. Talking to Dr. McKee, fish don't always float. Dead fish end up on the bottom and they just sit there and things eat them, whatever happens. But the true numbers don't all float. We're going to need to wait until we see the gill net surveys. They're going to happen April through June is when they'll do those surveys along our shorelines and stuff like they have for years and years. That's going to tell the tale a whole lot more about what actually survived out there. I think it's going to be eye-opening in some places, how many fish actually made it, and some other areas it's going to be eye-opening in the other direction, I'm afraid. So we can all do our part through some catch and release. I'm seeing a lot more guides jumping on board with that on social media. Everybody's talking about it. I think that's a great thing. there's so much pressure on our fish up and down the coast. This hit is just something they didn't need. The fish that are here in Port O'Connor, those are going to be some of the ones in our West Matagorda area and the rest of Port O'Connor. They're going to be the ones that we're counting on to repopulate places. Nature always fills a void. And if there's a big void over there in East Bay, in Matagorda, then all the fish from West Bay need to step it up, man. And we need to leave them alone for a little bit, let them do their thing, do some spawning. Just take one or two if you want some for dinner, but maybe concentrate on some other species. Redfish don't appear to have been hit very hard. Haven't seen a whole lot of snapper. Bay snapper, that's my favorite. And if you kind of take a little bit of pressure off the trout for a little while, I think that would help us all out. Appreciate it, and hope y'all are all having a good time out there and everybody can get out and start fishing again.
All right, moving on from Port O'Connor. Thank you, Scott. It sounds to me, what I'm catching from that is that the fish in the back lakes and the shallower ponds, they caught it pretty rough, which we saw all that early in the freeze. You know, a lot of the times when you see these cold snaps, Port O'Connor is really one of the ones that's always highlighted. Those fish in that shallow water, they just have a rough time with it. But it sounds like the main bay of Port O'Connor is doing okay. I haven't heard anything bad about San Antonio Bay or Mesquite Bay. You know, they've got some deeper water in them. So I haven't heard too much there. Let's move on down to Aransas Pass to talk to Dean Thomas. Dean's been out. He's been keeping an eye on things. He was on the show last week. So, you know, this is what Dean has to say about Aransas Pass, Rockport area.
Hey everybody, Captain Dean Thomas of Slow Ride Guide Services checking in today for my weekly report. It's been a crazy week. It's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of gathering data on the fish that got killed and the fish that are still alive. So last couple of days, covered a lot of water, explored a lot of area. Good news and bad news. Good news is that I haven't seen any dead redfish, so I take that as a plus. The bad news is there's a lot of dead speckled trout, and it seems that the larger trout were more susceptible to the cold. Not too many schoolies floating. I mean, there's a lot, there's some, but compared to the big ones, it seems like there's more large trout that were victim of the cold. Today, we drifted a lot of deeper sand holes, grass beds in Ransom, Dagger Flats, Estes, and stuff near the intercoastal. And we caught a lot of small trout, threw them all back, but it was good to know that there's a seed out there that will hopefully be a part of the rejuvenation of our speckled trout population. But all that being said, it's been a great week. There's a lot of fish floating here in Aransas Pass, a lot of mullet. The smell is overwhelming. It's blowing all the way into town. So we try to be optimistic. We try to take a look at the good side along with the bad. And as the seasons change, you know, I was concerned with the bait fish. What are the big fish that are gonna eat? So a lot of the bait fish that are here, of course, are dead. But with the spring migration, we have shad that come into the bay. We have shrimp that hatch out of the mud pretty soon. So hopefully those things start happening. We will continue to monitor that and be happy to report back, you know, weekly with the data that I gather, and just be a part of sharing what I see out there. What you do with that information is your own business. But we're gonna do our best to let everybody know what's going on out there. So thanks a lot for taking time to listen, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right, thanks, Dean. I was at Dean's house yesterday there in Aransas Pass, and boy, the smell of all those dead bait fish and everything floating up, it's not a very pleasant place to be in Aransas Pass or Rockport right now, just because of that smell. But so down in the Laguna Madre and Baffin, in that area, we had, let me grab my notes. I had Cliff Webb. He went and looked at a lot of stuff. I've been speaking to Mr. Webb since early in the week. He went looking at a lot of stuff. We had a hard time getting his video from him to here, so I took notes on what he told me, and I'm gonna push it forward to you guys. So Mr. Webb says Sunday he went to the land cut, went down a 9 Mile Hole, you know, those kind of areas. There was quite a bit of death in 9 Mile Hole, but then he said that later on he went in there, he didn't see more dead fish. He saw no live fish, which again is alarming, but 9 Mile Hole is kind of up in the air right now. In the land cut, he said he saw a lot of dead trout. The southern portion of the land cut was the worst. He made a comment that there were a lot of turtles. There's the opinion that these trout, they get down on bottom and they lay in the mud. So they expel all the air out of their swim bladder and they lay on the bottom. They're laying in the mud. And then when the barges come over them, they stir up the mud and it ends up landing on top of these fish and suffocating them. They found a lot of trout with mud in their mouth and in their gills. They said they would find them floating with their tail straight up out of the water like this. So instead of floating flat like a dead fish, they're like this. And then the reason why is because they've got a big old gob of mud in their head. So the barge traffic, I'm sure every one of you have seen it on social media this week that the barge traffic has been quite the hot topic, and this is one of the reasons why. He made the comment to me that when the fish are laying up on the edges and those big wakes come by from the barges, I don't know if all of you get to fish around barges, but I certainly do. And as the barge is coming, it sucks a bunch of water off the bank, and then when it leaves, it is a tidal wave back up on the bank. And he said that was shoving fish up on the edges and the shallows to where they were having a hard time righting themselves and getting back. So that certainly could have been a big part of the kill in the land cut as well. Sea turtles were something that he was really worried about. The sea turtles were in the land cut there. And if you guys don't know what the land cut is, it's like the intercoastal, but it's just landlocked on both sides. But the turtles were there pretty thick, and whenever the barges were coming through, he said you could hear their shells snapping in the propeller. So it was just a rough deal at all. I mean, overall with the barges. But he said in the land cut he would consider it a spotty to thick kill. So in some areas, it was littered a little bit, and in some areas that the kill was a lot thicker. So he said behind the tide gauge there in Baffin that it was just absolutely loaded with dead bait fish. And this is from today. He was there today. I got this report from him at 4 o'clock. He said behind the tide gauge, it was absolutely loaded with dead bait fish and the whatnot back there. Alazan, back there towards the back of the Baffin, there were bull reds and trout. They were dead in there pretty thick, but they were possibly floating in from the south shoreline of Baffin. But he said there in Alazan, it was pretty rough. They did fish some today, didn't really get any bites, and I want to clarify, right away that after meeting with the biologist, they're asking for what they call hook and line research, which is they're asking for the fishermen to go see if they can catch a fish. They're not asking for them to throw them in the cooler. They're just asking for them to see if they can catch a fish, and that gives them more data on what's out there and what's alive. But there in Alazan, they were dead pretty thick. He said maybe they were floating across from the south shoreline. The very back of Alazan is still showing signs of death popping up. The south shoreline of Baffin had a pretty bad kill, and he's hoping that the Riviera Channel is sheltered some of them. The Riviera Channel is about 9 foot deep, but it doesn't have the barge traffic and whatnot coming through it. So he's hoping that shelters some of those fish. Again, we're not saying that everything's dead. We're just saying there's a significant kill. The Meadows, which is the area around the intercoastal, it's on the Padre Island side. He said there was quite a lot of death around there, and then those areas that border the ICW. So there was quite a bit there. And then there in Baffin, he said saw very little live bait and not very many signs of life, which is what I was experiencing in East Matagorda earlier in the week. I saw one mullet and no signs of life, and that kind of, it resulted in what we're seeing here in the last couple of days, where there's just, literally tons of trout floating up there in East Matagorda. But again, no one's saying they're all gone. This is all too early to tell. Let's keep an eye on it. But current situation, Upper Laguna Madre. Somebody commented on my last one and said, why didn't you have somebody in the Upper Laguna Madre? I didn't have Mr. Webb last week. I have him now. Upper Laguna Madre, better news. He said he flew a drone and saw several live wads of fish, mostly reds and drum, with a handful of trout. The deeper channels off of the sides of the Upper Laguna, he said that those were showing life, and the deeper canals around Whitewater or Whitecaps and all that, those were showing signs of life. So that's a very positive thing. So even if you lost some fish off of the flats, there's some other ones out there to spawn and help replenish. But overall, he said that his message was there was a major kill in multiple areas, that he hopes that people practice catch and release, and to give these living fish a chance to spawn. Even a 16, 17, 18-inch trout can produce a lot of eggs and help us get back on track. So, anybody that feels like doing their part, that would be absolutely fantastic. He did send me a side note that some people went out red fishing today. They caught some redfish. So I haven't heard reports anywhere of a major redfish kill, which is, it's a great thing. You know, it gives us something to do, because while everybody's out talking about, you know, we need to catch and release, at the same time, nobody's saying you can't go fishing. You know, there's been people say, I've been one of them, that while the water's really cold and these fish are really struggling, maybe leave them alone now. But, you know, nobody's saying don't go fishing, don't have a good time. They're just saying take care of what you catch. So that's the report from Mr. Webb. I thank him so much. That's for the land cut, Baffin, and the upper Laguna. And now we're going to move down to Captain Wayne Davis. He was on the last video. He's a great steward of the resource. He's done, you know, the work with the biologists just like I've been doing. And you know, let's let Mr. Davis take it away. He, you know, like I said, they have the hook and line research. So Mr. Davis took 7 people out with him to try to catch some fish. And here's what he had to say about that.
Howdy folks, Captain Wayne Davis out here in Port Mansfield. This is a post-freeze day. We're out here trying to get a bite. This is for Captain Caleb. He's putting another clip together for everybody. We've been out here just a little while. The wind's blowing pretty strong. We're in an area where we generally catch a lot of nice trout and a lot of redfish. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're gonna have 7 anglers out here. We haven't had a hit yet. We haven't landed a fish. I think there's been a couple of bites, probably some small reds or redfish. No trout. We're on a deadline, so we're getting a little the information out. We're going to stay out here longer, but currently no landed fish. Water's kind of turned up a little bit. We still even have some floating fish coming through here. Hopefully we'll start to get a bite. We're just trying to do a cast to catch if we can get some fish, you know, after this the fish kill from the freeze. So until this is just a preliminary report after the freeze. So this is where we're at. Nothing yet. There's a few mullet jumping. It looks okay. But we are going to give it a full day out here to see if we can get something for Captain Caleb. And until next time, we'll give you another report update in the future. But right now, not a lot of bites. It's still early though, so stay with us. We'll get something back out to you guys.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davis. And that's why, you know, they asked for this hook and line research. We can easily count the dead fish. It's harder to count the live fish. Mr. Davis sent me that video about 1 o'clock today. I was trying to work on a deadline here, but it is now 6:45 in the evening, and I just spoke with Mr. Davis. He said that the day continued to be slow, not much of a bite. So again, that's that hook and line research. It gives us an idea. You know, he said he was in an area that he can usually catch fish, and if anybody can catch them, it's Mr. Davis. So, you know, that gives us a forecast of what's going on down there. Moving on to the lower Laguna, I spoke with Captain Ernest Cisneros on the phone about, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour ago. Captain Cisneros said that in the South Padre, Port Isabel area, they've seen a little bit of a kill, but the live fish population is still pretty healthy. That, you know, they have some deeper water down there, and that gradual cool down gave those fish time to get to it. So South Padre sounds like it's doing good. So thank you so much for Mr. Cisneros. So I hope that I covered the areas that you guys are interested in. I hope there's as much good news as there is bad news. You know, I'm certainly happy to do it. I've been catching some criticism about it, but hey, I'm willing to do that. I want you guys to have the truth from guys that I trust on the water. So hey, next week we're going to talk to the biologist, Mr. David McKee. We're going to compare the historic freezes to what we saw now, and we will catch you on the next one.